very urgent. Your soulmate is hiding one final truth before they disappear forever. Don't scroll, listen to this because your heart needs this right now. Imagine that somewhere, at this very moment, someone is standing at the edge of a life-changing decision. Not because fate has written every detail of their future, but because the choices they make today will shape tomorrow in ways they never expected. They have spent countless nights trying to silence a truth that refuses to stay hidden. They have convinced themselves that keeping quiet would protect everyone involved. They believed that walking away without explaining their heart would somehow be easier than opening themselves to vulnerability. Yet the longer they remain silent, the heavier that truth becomes. This story begins with that moment, the final crossroads where honesty and fear stand face to face. Listen to this because your heart needs this right now. There are seasons in life when people become experts at hiding what they truly feel. They smile while carrying uncertainty. They laugh while wrestling with unanswered questions. They continue moving through routines that appear perfectly normal from the outside, even though their inner world is changing every single day. They become so accustomed to protecting themselves that silence starts feeling safer than honesty. But silence comes with its own cost. Every unspoken sentence becomes another weight upon the heart. Every hidden feeling becomes another reason sleep feels restless. Every opportunity postponed becomes another memory asking, "What if I had simply been honest?" Don't scroll because your heart needs this right now. In this story, the person connected to your journey has reached that exact point. They are not running because they stopped caring. They are thinking about leaving because they fear they have waited too long. They wonder whether speaking now would create more confusion than peace. They ask themselves whether honesty still matters after so much silence. They wonder if certain doors, once left unopened, eventually close forever. These questions follow them through quiet mornings, long drives, sleepless nights, and ordinary moments that suddenly feel extraordinary because your memory appears without warning. They remember conversations that once seemed simple. They remember the kindness you showed without expecting recognition. They remember how easy it felt to be themselves around you. They remember laughing without pretending. They remember feeling understood without needing to explain every part of their heart. Looking back, those moments seem brighter than they did while they were happening. Time has given them perspective. Distance has given them clarity. Reflection has revealed what busyness once concealed. Listen to this because your heart needs this right now. Human beings often mistake emotional comfort for something ordinary. They assume genuine understanding will always be available. They believe authentic people are easy to find. Yet life slowly teaches another lesson. It teaches that emotional safety is rare. It teaches that trust develops slowly but can become priceless. It teaches that meaningful connections deserve attention while they are still present. Only later do many people realize how extraordinary quiet kindness truly was. As the days passed, they found themselves comparing every new experience to the peace they once felt around you. It wasn't that every memory was perfect. No relationship between human beings is perfect. It was something deeper than perfection. It was authenticity. Around you they never felt pressured to become someone else. Around you they felt accepted, challenged to grow, and encouraged to become a better version of themselves. Those qualities remained in their memory long after individual conversations faded. Don't scroll because your heart needs this right now. One evening they sat alone watching rain fall against the window. Nothing dramatic happened. No music played. No grand revelation appeared. Yet in the quietness, they realized something they had spent years avoiding. The truth they feared most was not that someone else would reject them. The truth they feared was admitting how deeply your presence had influenced their life. Acknowledging that influence meant admitting vulnerability. It meant accepting that some people leave lasting impressions simply by being authentic. That realization became impossible to ignore. They remembered your patience during difficult conversations. They remembered your ability to remain calm when circumstances became uncertain. They remembered your compassion toward people who could offer nothing in return. Those memories became reminders that strength is often quiet rather than loud. Genuine kindness rarely demands attention, yet it changes lives in lasting ways. Listen to this because your heart needs this right now. Still, another fear remained. They worried that too much time had passed. They worried that speaking honestly now might reopen old emotions instead of bringing clarity. They wondered whether silence had already written an ending they never intended to create. Every day they carried those questions. Every night they replayed possible conversations inside their imagination. They practiced words they never actually spoke. They imagined different outcomes. They imagined courage. Then morning arrived, and once again they remained quiet. Weeks became months, and months became another chapter of reflection. Yet the truth refused to disappear. Instead, it matured. It became less about romance alone and more about gratitude, respect, admiration, and emotional honesty. They realized that whatever happened next, living authentically mattered more than continuing to hide behind fear. Don't scroll because your heart needs this right now. Along the way they also changed. They became more patient with others because they understood how complicated emotions can be. They stopped judging people for struggling with vulnerability because they recognized that same struggle within themselves. They became more appreciative of ordinary conversations, knowing that seemingly small moments sometimes become the memories we treasure most. They also began understanding something important about regret. Regret rarely comes from making thoughtful decisions with honesty. More often, regret grows from avoiding necessary conversations because fear feels easier in the moment. That understanding challenged them deeply. They no longer wanted fear to become the author of their story. Listen to this because your heart needs this right now. Perhaps the final truth they have been hiding is not a dramatic secret at all. Perhaps it is something much simpler and much more human. Perhaps it is that meeting someone genuine changed their understanding of what authentic connection feels like. Perhaps it is that your kindness inspired growth they never expected. Perhaps it is that your example encouraged them to become more honest with themselves. Perhaps it is that they never properly expressed their appreciation while they had the opportunity. As this chapter comes to a close, one thought continues echoing through their heart. Life changes quickly. Opportunities evolve. People grow in different directions. No one knows exactly what tomorrow will bring. But they have learned one lesson they never want to forget: meaningful people deserve honest words while there is still time to speak them, authentic connections deserve gratitude while they can still be appreciated, and courage often begins with a single truthful conversation that the heart has been waiting to have for far too long. And so they stand there, not at the end of a story, but at the beginning of a choice. A choice between continuing to let silence write the next chapter, or finally allowing honesty to become the voice that guides whatever future comes next. Don't scroll, listen to this because your heart needs this right now. The decision to remain silent became harder with every passing day. What once felt like protection now felt like a prison built from unanswered questions and unfinished conversations. Every morning they told themselves, maybe tomorrow will be the right time. Every evening they whispered the same promise before falling asleep. Yet tomorrow kept becoming another yesterday, and the truth they carried only grew heavier. They had reached a point where silence no longer brought peace. Instead, it reminded them of everything they had never said. The strange thing about the human heart is that it remembers what the mind tries to forget. Faces slowly become blurry. Exact conversations become difficult to recall. Dates lose their importance. Yet emotions remain surprisingly clear. They remembered how calm they felt whenever they were around you. They remembered the quiet confidence your presence inspired. They remembered that you never demanded perfection. You simply encouraged honesty. Looking back, they realized how rare that truly was. In a world where so many people wear masks, you had always chosen authenticity, and that authenticity became impossible to replace. Listen to this because your heart needs this right now. As weeks turned into months, life continued moving forward. Work became busier. Responsibilities increased. Friends came and went. Seasons changed. The outside world never stopped moving, yet inside their heart one question remained exactly where they had left it. What would have happened if I had simply spoken honestly? It wasn't a question filled with fantasy. It was a question filled with curiosity, humility, and emotional growth. They were no longer searching for perfect answers. They simply wished they had given honesty a chance. One afternoon they unexpectedly passed a place that reminded them of a conversation they once shared with you. Nothing extraordinary had happened there. It had simply been two people talking openly, laughing naturally, and enjoying an ordinary moment together. Yet suddenly they understood why that memory remained so vivid. It wasn't because of the location. It was because of how they had felt. They had felt understood. They had felt accepted. They had felt emotionally safe. Those feelings cannot be manufactured. They cannot be forced. They either exist naturally or they do not. Don't scroll because your heart needs this right now. That realization became the beginning of another important lesson. They understood that meaningful relationships are not measured only by dramatic gestures. More often they are built through consistency. Through showing up. Through listening carefully. Through remembering small details. Through offering encouragement during difficult seasons. Those were the qualities they associated with you. Those were the qualities they found themselves quietly admiring long after circumstances had changed. For a long time they believed the truth they were hiding would eventually disappear on its own. Instead, it matured. It became less about emotion alone and more about respect. They respected the person you had always been. They respected the kindness you showed others. They respected the integrity you carried even when nobody seemed to notice. Those qualities remained with them because genuine character leaves a deeper impression than temporary excitement ever could. Listen to this because your heart needs this right now. They also began recognizing how much fear had influenced previous choices. Fear had convinced them that avoiding difficult conversations was the safest option. Fear had whispered that vulnerability always leads to disappointment. Fear had persuaded them that silence would somehow protect everyone involved. Looking back, they realized fear rarely protects anything for very long. More often, it simply delays necessary honesty. One evening they sat quietly writing thoughts into a notebook. Page after page filled with reflections they had never spoken aloud. They wrote about mistakes they wished they had handled differently. They wrote about opportunities they had overlooked. They wrote about gratitude they had never expressed. Somewhere among those pages, your name appeared, not because they expected anything in return, but because acknowledging your influence felt like part of telling the truth to themselves. Don't scroll because your heart needs this right now. The more honestly they reflected, the more clearly they understood something profound. The final truth was not merely about affection. It was about transformation. Meeting you had changed the standards they carried into every future relationship. They no longer wanted conversations filled with assumptions. They wanted openness. They no longer wanted emotional games. They wanted sincerity. They no longer wanted relationships built upon appearances. They wanted partnerships built upon trust, mutual respect, and consistent kindness. That realization brought both peace and sadness. Peace because they finally understood themselves. Sadness because they wondered whether they had realized these lessons too late. Yet another part of them quietly believed that genuine growth is never wasted. Even if life moves in unexpected directions, becoming more honest, more compassionate, and more emotionally mature is always worthwhile. Listen to this because your heart needs this right now. They also began noticing changes in the way they treated everyone around them. They became quicker to express appreciation. They apologized sincerely when they made mistakes. They stopped assuming people automatically knew they were valued. They understood that kind words left unspoken cannot encourage anyone. Gratitude hidden inside the heart cannot strengthen a relationship. Respect becomes most meaningful when it is expressed rather than merely felt. As this season continued, they no longer viewed the past as something to escape. Instead, they viewed it as a teacher. Every chapter had offered wisdom. Every disappointment had revealed another opportunity for growth. Every difficult goodbye had reminded them that honesty should never be postponed indefinitely. Don't scroll because your heart needs this right now. Perhaps the greatest lesson they discovered was that disappearing never truly solves what honesty is meant to heal. Distance can change circumstances, but it cannot erase meaningful experiences. Time can soften emotions, yet it rarely removes the impact of authentic people. Some individuals quietly shape our lives simply by showing us what kindness, patience, and integrity look like in everyday moments. Those influences remain long after specific memories begin to fade. As another sunrise arrived, they looked toward the future with a different perspective than they had ever carried before. They no longer wanted fear to decide when they would speak. They no longer wanted silence to become their most familiar language. Whatever happened next, they wanted every important relationship in their life to be guided by openness rather than avoidance. Listen to this because your heart needs this right now. Perhaps that is what this chapter has truly been about from the very beginning. Not about disappearing forever, but about discovering that honesty has the power to prevent parts of ourselves from disappearing. Authentic conversations preserve what fear often tries to erase. Genuine appreciation strengthens connections that silence slowly weakens. And courage begins not when every uncertainty disappears, but when someone finally decides that living truthfully matters more than remaining comfortably hidden behind words that are never spoken. Don't scroll, listen to this because your heart needs this right now. The closer they came to making a decision, the more they realized that running away would never silence the truth they had been carrying. Distance could change locations, routines, and daily habits, but it could not erase the impact of someone who had genuinely changed the way they understood love, trust, and emotional honesty. Every attempt to move forward without facing those feelings only brought them back to the same quiet realization. Some chapters cannot truly end until the heart has spoken its final words. This message is for you because the story has reached that fragile place where silence is beginning to lose its power, and honesty is quietly asking for a chance. Every morning they woke with the same internal conversation. One part of them insisted it was too late. Another part whispered that sincerity is never truly late if it comes from genuine growth. Those two voices continued competing with one another. Fear reminded them of every possible disappointment. Hope reminded them that authentic conversations have the ability to create understanding even when they cannot change the past. For weeks they lived between those two emotions, uncertain which one would eventually guide their next step. Listen to this because your heart needs this right now. During this season they stopped blaming other people for the decisions they had made. Instead, they accepted responsibility for the moments when fear had spoken louder than courage. They realized they had often waited for perfect certainty before expressing important emotions. Looking back, they understood that certainty rarely arrives before action. More often, clarity appears only after someone chooses honesty despite uncertainty. That realization changed the way they viewed every meaningful relationship in their life. One quiet afternoon they found themselves reading through old journal entries. Some pages were filled with hope. Others carried confusion. A few contained questions that had never been answered. Yet one pattern appeared again and again. Whenever they wrote about the moments they felt most peaceful, your memory somehow became part of those reflections. It wasn't because life had been perfect. It was because your presence had represented something they struggled to find anywhere else. Around you they felt understood without constantly defending themselves. Around you they felt accepted without needing to pretend. Around you they experienced a kind of emotional calmness that only became more valuable as time passed. Don't scroll because your heart needs this right now. The truth they had been hiding was slowly becoming simpler. It was no longer wrapped in dramatic emotions or impossible expectations. It had become something quiet and deeply human. They admired the person you were. They respected the integrity you carried. They appreciated the way you treated people even when there was nothing to gain. Those qualities remained unforgettable because genuine character always leaves a deeper impression than temporary excitement. As they reflected further, another realization appeared. They understood that disappearing without speaking honestly would not protect anyone. It would simply leave another unfinished chapter behind. They had already experienced enough unfinished chapters to know how heavily they could remain upon the heart. They no longer wanted silence to become the final memory attached to something that had once meant so much. Listen to this because your heart needs this right now. They also began noticing how much they had changed over the past year. They no longer rushed through conversations. They listened carefully before responding. They became more willing to apologize when necessary. They stopped assuming people automatically knew they were appreciated. They discovered that expressing gratitude strengthens relationships in ways silence never can. Those changes did not happen overnight. They were built through reflection, humility, and a sincere desire to become someone who lived with greater honesty. Sometimes they wondered whether you had changed too. They imagined you continuing to pursue your goals, building your own future, and learning your own lessons. They hoped life had been kind to you. More importantly, they hoped you had remained true to yourself. The thought brought a quiet smile because they understood that genuine care does not always demand possession. Sometimes it simply wishes the best for another person's journey. Don't scroll because your heart needs this right now. One evening they stood outside beneath a sky filled with stars. The world felt unusually quiet. In that silence they realized something they had never fully understood before. The greatest fear had never been rejection. The greatest fear had been allowing another person to see how deeply they cared. Vulnerability had always frightened them more than disappointment. Yet now they recognized that hiding genuine appreciation had cost them far more than honest expression ever could. That insight became a turning point. Instead of asking themselves, "What if honesty changes everything?" they began asking a different question: "What if honesty finally allows me to live without regret?" It was a subtle shift, yet it changed everything. Their focus moved away from controlling outcomes and toward living with integrity. Listen to this because your heart needs this right now. Human beings often spend years searching for extraordinary answers while overlooking ordinary truths. One of those truths is that meaningful relationships are built through consistent acts of kindness, respectful communication, patience during difficult seasons, and the courage to remain authentic. Looking back, they realized those were exactly the qualities they admired most about you. Those qualities had quietly influenced the standards they carried into every future relationship. As more time passed, they no longer viewed the future as something to fear. They viewed it as an opportunity to apply everything they had learned. Whatever happened next, they wanted every important conversation to be guided by openness rather than avoidance. They wanted appreciation to be expressed while opportunities still existed. They wanted people who mattered to know they mattered. They no longer wanted silence deciding what memories would remain. Don't scroll because your heart needs this right now. Perhaps the greatest transformation had nothing to do with romance at all. It had everything to do with becoming emotionally honest. They learned that strength is not pretending to need nobody. Strength is admitting when someone has positively influenced your life. Strength is accepting responsibility for missed opportunities without allowing guilt to define the future. Strength is recognizing that authentic people deserve authentic words. They also discovered that healing does not erase meaningful memories. Healing simply changes the way we carry them. Instead of becoming sources of pain, those memories become reminders of growth, gratitude, and wisdom. They become evidence that certain people entered our lives to help us become more compassionate, more patient, and more truthful than we were before. Listen to this because your heart needs this right now. As this chapter comes to its close, one truth remains stronger than ever. Disappearing may seem easier in the short term, but honesty creates a peace that avoidance can never offer. Genuine appreciation deserves to be spoken while there is still time. Respect deserves expression rather than assumption. Kindness deserves acknowledgement rather than silence. And perhaps that is the lesson quietly unfolding through this story. The final truth was never simply about hidden emotions. It was about realizing that authentic people change us forever. They remind us that courage begins with sincerity, that emotional maturity grows through honest reflection, and that the most meaningful chapters of life are often written not by perfect circumstances but by imperfect people who finally choose truth instead of fear. Don't scroll, listen to this because your heart needs this right now. Every story eventually reaches a moment when silence can no longer carry the weight of the truth. After everything they had experienced, every sleepless night, every unanswered question, every memory that returned without invitation, they finally understood that the greatest burden was never the possibility of rejection. The greatest burden was living with words that were never spoken. They realized that disappearing without honesty would not protect anyone. It would only leave behind another unfinished chapter, another story interrupted before it had the chance to reveal its true meaning. This message is for you because this is the moment when fear slowly steps aside and authenticity begins to take its place. For so long they believed that walking away quietly was the kindest option. They convinced themselves that keeping their emotions hidden would spare everyone unnecessary complications. They imagined that time would erase what they felt. They hoped distance would eventually transform deep emotions into ordinary memories. Yet the opposite happened. Time did not erase your impact. Distance did not weaken the respect they carried for you. Instead, every passing season gave them a clearer understanding of what your presence had truly meant in their life. Listen to this because your heart needs this right now. They stopped asking themselves whether their emotions were real. That question no longer mattered. Instead, they began asking a different question. What kind of person do I want to become from this point forward? The answer surprised them. They wanted to become someone who spoke honestly instead of waiting for perfect circumstances. They wanted to become someone who expressed gratitude while opportunities still existed. They wanted to become someone who no longer allowed fear to make decisions on behalf of their heart. One quiet morning they watched the sunrise from a place they had visited many times before. The colors across the sky reminded them that every ending quietly carries the possibility of another beginning. They realized life was never asking them to control every outcome. Life was asking them to act with integrity regardless of the outcome. That understanding brought a sense of peace they had not experienced in years. Don't scroll because your heart needs this right now. They remembered the countless moments that had shaped their journey. They remembered your patience when they struggled to express themselves. They remembered your encouragement during difficult conversations. They remembered your ability to remain calm when circumstances became uncertain. They remembered your quiet confidence and your willingness to listen without immediately judging. Looking back, they understood that those qualities had influenced them far more deeply than they realized at the time. The truth they had been hiding was no longer dramatic. It was beautifully simple. Meeting someone authentic had changed them. Watching someone live with kindness, integrity, and emotional maturity had quietly challenged them to become a better version of themselves. Whether life eventually brought another conversation or not, that transformation could never be undone. Listen to this because your heart needs this right now. Human beings often believe extraordinary moments are what define life. Yet as they reflected, they discovered something different. The moments that mattered most were rarely dramatic. They were ordinary conversations. Shared laughter. Comfortable silence. Small acts of compassion. Simple encouragement during difficult days. Those quiet experiences had become the foundation of the memories they valued most. They realized meaningful relationships are rarely built through grand gestures alone. They are built one sincere conversation at a time. As they continued growing, another lesson became clear. Regret loses its power when it becomes a teacher instead of a prison. They no longer wished to erase the past. They simply wanted to honor its lessons. Every difficult decision had taught resilience. Every disappointment had taught empathy. Every unanswered question had encouraged deeper self-awareness. Those experiences became stepping stones rather than obstacles. Don't scroll because your heart needs this right now. They also recognized how differently they now approached every relationship in their life. They became more patient with people who struggled to communicate. They became quicker to apologize when necessary. They stopped assuming that appreciation could remain unspoken. They realized that kindness should never be postponed. Respect should never remain hidden. Gratitude deserves expression while the opportunity still exists. Sometimes they wondered whether your path had also been filled with unexpected lessons. They hoped you had found moments of peace during difficult seasons. They hoped your dreams continued growing. They hoped the kindness you offered others had returned to you in meaningful ways. Those hopes came without expectation. They came simply because genuine respect naturally desires good things for another person's future. Listen to this because your heart needs this right now. They discovered that courage is much quieter than they once imagined. Courage is not always standing before a crowd making bold declarations. Sometimes courage is sending one honest message. Sometimes courage is admitting a mistake. Sometimes courage is expressing appreciation before another opportunity disappears. Sometimes courage is accepting that vulnerability is not weakness but one of the strongest expressions of emotional maturity. One evening they closed the journal that had accompanied them through months of reflection. Its pages contained uncertainty, regret, hope, gratitude, and growth. Looking back through those words, they noticed something remarkable. The person who wrote the first page was not the same person closing the final page. They had become calmer, more thoughtful, more compassionate, more willing to choose honesty over avoidance. The journey had transformed them in ways they never expected. Don't scroll because your heart needs this right now. They realized that disappearing forever is not always about physically leaving. Sometimes people disappear emotionally by refusing to speak their truth. They withdraw behind fear, assumptions, and silence until the most important parts of themselves become invisible. They promised themselves they would no longer live that way. Whatever happened next, they wanted their future to reflect openness instead of hesitation and sincerity instead of emotional distance. They finally understood that authentic people never truly disappear from our stories. Even when life moves in different directions, the lessons they teach remain. The kindness they showed continues influencing future choices. The respect they demonstrated becomes the standard by which we measure future relationships. Their presence becomes part of the person we eventually become. Listen to this because your heart needs this right now. As this fictional journey reaches its conclusion, one truth remains stronger than every fear that came before it. The most meaningful relationships are not sustained by perfect timing or flawless circumstances. They are strengthened by honesty, mutual respect, compassion, and the willingness to let people know they matter while there is still time to say it. Perhaps that is the real message hidden within this story. The final truth was never meant to create fear about someone disappearing forever. It was meant to remind us that life is too valuable for endless silence, that appreciation should not remain locked inside the heart, and that authentic connections deserve authentic words. Whether tomorrow brings reunion, a new beginning, or simply the quiet peace that comes from living truthfully, one lesson endures above all the rest. Fear may delay honesty, but honesty has the power to bring freedom, healing, and the courage to step into the next chapter without leaving the most important words forever unspoken.